This video will show you how to build a land change simulation model using the Dinamica software. The software we are using is Dinamica EGO version 2.4, and you should be familiar with the interface in order to best understand this video. You can watch tutorial videos on the Dinamica website to introduce yourself to the setup of the program. By the end of this video, we will describe how to run a land change model in Dinamica through a step-by-step demonstration of a land change model created for Massachusetts, United States. We will create a map that simulates land cover change in our study area in 1999 using a 1971 land use map and a 1985 land use map for the model's calibration interval. We will validate the results of our model using a cross-tabulation matrix between the 1985 and 1999 reference maps and the 1999 simulated map created in our model run of Dinamica. Our study area in this demonstration is the Plum Island ecosystems located north of Boston, Massachusetts. There are 4 steps in creating the predicted land cover map. Calculate transition matrix, determine weights of evidence ranges, determine weights of evidence coefficients, allocate change. In the first submodel, we will determine the transition matrix. Dinamica uses the Markov matrix to describe the transition rate between each pair of categories. In a Markov chain, changes in the next state depend only on the current state and not on the sequence of events that precede it. Only 2 categorical maps are needed because of this. Dinamica is also able to run in multi-time steps by deriving the multiple-step transition matrix. For our model, we will use a single-step transition matrix. And a quick reminder, Dinamica does not explicitly handle category names, so users have to remember the number codes. For our model, the codes are 1, forest, 2, built, 3, other. To calculate the transition matrix, add 2 load maps, which are 1971 and 1985 land use, into the working space of Dinamica. Add the determine transition matrix functor, connect the 2 maps to their corresponding ports of the functor, set the time steps, which is 14 years in our example, connect the functor to a new save table named single step, and then run the submodel. The output of the transition matrix in Dinamica is a table. The file can be opened in Dinamica, Notepad, Excel, or another text editing program. An additional step is required before moving on to the second submodel. We need to create the raster cube. In other words, a multi-layer image created by putting together images that have the same projection, coordinates, and number of lines and columns. This allows the user to integrate different driver variable maps into one image. To create the raster cube, add the load maps for the driver variables, which are the 21 land use categories in 1971 and elevation, into the working space of Dinamica. Add the create cube map functor, connect the 2 maps to their corresponding ports of the functor, connect the functor to a new save map named static var, and then run the submodel. In the second submodel, we will determine the weights of evidence ranges. The weights of evidence range functor defines the best ranges, in other words, intervals upon which to categorize continuous spatial variables. This is done through the weights of evidence skeleton input, which specifies the input of spatial variables, either categorical or continuous, and also defines 3 types of parameters: the minimum distance interval, the maximum distance interval, and the tolerance angle. And Dinamica will give default suggestions of these values. To determine the weights of evidence ranges, add the land use categorical maps and the static variable maps into the working space of Dinamica. Add the determine weights of evidence ranges functor, Add calculate distance map functor and connect it to the 1971 land use categorical map, thus including distance to previous built areas as an additional static variable, and Dinamica will calculate the parameters for the skeleton input. Connect the land use categorical maps, the static variable map, and the calculate distance map functor to their respective ports on the weights of evidence ranges functor. Open the skeleton editor and register all 5 transitions. The matrix will not show transitions between 2 to 1 in our example. Click the Copy Variables to Transition button on the bottom left. Connect the functor to save weights named ranges, and then run the submodel. The weights represent each variable's influence on the spatial probability of each transition. The first line of the output contains the ranges. The second line of the output contains the transition and each respective weights of evidence coefficient, which are automatically set to 0 as they have not yet been calculated. In the third submodel, we will determine the weights of evidence coefficients. The weights of evidence coefficients functor determines the best coefficients for selected spatial variables with respect to a set of transitions or one transition. In doing this, it calculates the empirical relationships between spatial variables. To determine weights of evidence coefficients, add the land use categorical maps and the static variable map into the working space of Dinamica. Add the determine weights of evidence coefficients functor. Add the weights of range output into the workspace. Connect it to the weights of evidence coefficient functor at the appropriate portal. Connect the functor to save weights named coefficients, and then run the submodel. And remember to keep the same names in name map or else the functor will not recognize the variables. After calculating the coefficients, look at the messenger log window. Displayed in columns left to right are, for each transition, the range, the buffer size in cells, the number of transitions occurring within each buffer, and the obtained coefficients. After finishing the 3 calibration submodels, we can now build the allocate change submodel. In this submodel, we will create a series of transition probability maps and a 1999 land use prediction map. To allocate change, load all necessary final inputs into the workspace. These include driver variable maps, the static variable map, raster cube, and distance to built 1971. The weights of evidence coefficients, the single-step matrix table, the landscape at the beginning of the prediction interval, and our prediction interval is 1985 to 1999, so we will load the 1985 land use categorical map. Drag the repeat functor into the workspace. This functor contains a set of functors specified by the user linked in a data flow chain with iterations determined by the user. The repeat functor is necessary when using the multi-step transition matrix and is not needed for our model since we are using the single-step matrix, but we are using it here to show you how the repeat functor can be used in the multi-step matrix process. Place 3 functors in repeat. First, add weights of evidence probability maps. This functor creates transitional probability maps that depict the probability of a cell at position XY to change from one land cover category to another. By listing all 5 transitions, we will have 5 different probability maps. These represent an index of ranks of the suitability to transition and are not actual probabilities. Connect the static variable map, the distance to 1971 built map, the coefficients, and the 1985 land use categorical map to their ports. Connect weights of evidence probability map functor to a save map. Second, add change matrix. This functor calculates the quantity of change by multiplying transition rates by the number of cells in each category to be changed. These are rounded to the nearest integer value. Transition net rate, percent, is converted to gross rate, number of cells, in this process. Connect the 1985 land use map and the single-step transition matrix to their ports. Third, add patcher. This functor combines the transition probability and the gross rate to create the final categorical prediction map by searching for cells around a chosen location for combined transition. First, it selects a core cell. Then it selects a specific number of cells around the core cell according to transition probabilities. The default patch size is 3 by 3, but we can change it by changing the number of neighbor lines and neighbor columns. Connect the weights of evidence probability map functor, the calculate change matrix functor, and the 1985 land use categorical map to their ports. Connect the patcher functor to a save map, and make sure everything is properly connected before running the final model. We can see here the predicted 1999 land cover map for our study area using the model built in Dinamica with elevation, distance to built, and land cover categories in 1971 as predictor variables. The row of maps on the left show the probability maps for each transition produced by the weights of evidence method in Dinamica. We conducted the validation of the hard classified map through the cross-tabulation between the reference 1985 and 99 maps and the predicted 1999 map. Hits of the model, which correspond to observed change predicted as change, represent 0.9% of the landscape. Most of the predicted change was predicted at incorrect locations, as we see from the proportion of the false alarms and wrong hits. The false alarms represent errors due to observed persistence predicted as change, while wrong hits refer to errors due to observed change predicted as wrong gaining category. Misses represent errors due to observed change predicted as persistence. The figure on the right is the validation map produced by the cross-tabulation displayed under a special palette. The figure on the left shows that the quantity difference between the predicted and the reference 1999 land cover map was about 1% of the landscape, while allocation difference, represented here as the addition of shift and exchange, represent the largest proportion of the total difference between the reference and the predicted map. Most of the exchange derives from the exchange between built and forest. We use the total operating characteristic method to conduct the validation of the soft classified maps, called probability maps in Dinamica. Here we are showing the results for the transitions to the built category. The figure on the left shows that the model was as good as random at predicting the forest to built transition, and it was better than random for predicting where the transition to built would not occur. The figure on the right shows that the model was better than random at predicting where the transition from other to built would occur, as well as where it would not occur. More information about validation methods, along with software for producing these metrics, can be found at the personal website of Professor Pontius. Also, a description of additional methods for validation of maps predicted with Dinamica can be found in a related video produced by other students in this class. Please follow the links shown in this video. We would like to thank Dr. Bertaldo Suarez Filo and the Dinamica team at the Federal University of Minas Gerais for producing the Dinamica EGO software, and the Office of Geographic Information of Massachusetts for producing the land use maps used in this project. Thank you also to Professor Pontius for developing the programs for map validation and TOC curve, and the class of Quantitative Environmental Modeling, Spring 2014, for providing feedback for this project.